Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Poor Man's Chemist. In this video, we are going to be making potash, which is crude potassium carbonate, and we are going to be making this from wood ashes. Now, my goal in this video is to do this using only materials that you can find in nature. Obviously, I am fudging it a little bit because I am using some scrap wood here and I've got some paper in there to help get this thing going. It really depends on what you would want this potash for, whether or not using scrap wood is acceptable. Because, I mean, any kind of wood that's meant for outdoor use is generally treated with compounds of varying nastiness, whose nastiness may or may not be destroyed by fire. So you may want to go with only untreated wood, like you would find in the woods, like this kind of shit right here. If you are making potash for, say, for example, you're going to use that to prepare an herbal preparation for human consumption. Maybe you're just into herbalism and doing it with natural stuff. Maybe you're doing some kind of alchemical preparation, because alchemy makes a lot of use of potash and potassium carbonate. And if it's anything that's going, or you might be using it as fertilizer, since potash contains potassium, which is one of the 3 essential nutrients that you tend to need to add to soil in order to make plants grow. The other 2 being nitrogen and sulfur. So yeah, if you're using it for anything like that, you're probably going to want to go with exclusively natural wood. Now, this whole process is very simple. We are simply going to set this shit on fire, let it burn. We are going to let it burn itself down until it is a fine white ash. Then we are going to collect that, extract that with water, filter off all the insoluble shit, and that will leave us with a solution of mostly potassium carbonate. And then we will evaporate that down. We will see what we can do about calcining it. And that will be it. We will have produced mostly potassium carbonate, using materials that are essentially, just straight from nature. So that, anybody that can make a fire and produce wood ashes can do this. So, yeah, it's pretty damn neat thing. Now, I decided that since this gives me a good opportunity to do so, I would talk a little bit about building a fire. I'm aware we do have a few city slickers in the audience. What's up, city chem peeps? So, for some of y'all may not know how to build a fire because you've never done it before. It's totally understandable. Now, hopefully you can kind of see the general theme here, where we have branches that are laid, and kind of and right angles to each other, just alternating layers of it. And we only ever have a few branches per layer. The topmost one can have stuff all the way across it because it's the topmost layer and it's going to be burned up from underneath. But underneath that, it's not solid like that all the way across. There are large open spaces in there. So once the fire gets going, it has a lot of space to draw air in, and it has a lot of space to expand, and it just makes the fire much more efficient. It makes it much easier to start. Now, the other thing that I thought that I would demonstrate is how to properly start a bonfire using an accelerant. Since this seems to be something that you go by the videos on the internet, man, a ton of motherfuckers don't seem to understand how to do this safely. This is not rocket science, people. So you see here, I've got a little tea light candle there, burning in there, see? So we've got our source of ignition. It is already here on the pile. You don't want to be like those dumbasses that you see that blow themselves up, who first douse it with the accelerant and then add the fire. No, that is not the way to go. Now, Our accelerant is going to be some ethyl acetate that became contaminated. You will notice that I have it in a sealed container. You will also note that the can is way the fuck over there and that the lid is securely on it. This is so that we don't have a vapor trail ignite. I think it's highly unlikely in the wind we've got going on out here, but still, general fire safety, man. You don't want to catch fire. That would suck. Now, to start our fire, all we need to do is take the lid off of this, and we're just going to chuck that shit right there onto the flame, like so. And there you go. A fire. Whoa, let's move it back a little bit. That's how you start a fire with an accelerant without setting yourself on fire or blowing yourself up. See? Very, very easy. Now, this thing will, I mean, the way it's going now, it will catch and it will burn. And, yeah, it should not really require any maintenance other than to, once it starts, burning down close to the ground, we're going to want to push, wood that's at the edges. We're going to want to push it towards the center so that everything can burn up fully. Now there's nothing for it except to just let it burn. Another thing that I would say is it's best to, if at all possible, let it burn all night, right? So this is going now. I'm not going to do anything with it until tomorrow morning when I wake up. That way it has a chance to burn down fully, because fire has a tendency to look like it's done when it's not. So you'll have like this bed of coals and you'll be like thinking, oh, okay, it's done. No. What that is it's full of glowing fucking chunks of carbon. Let it keep going until it burns itself out on its own, and that will reduce everything down to a fine white powder. That fine white powdery ash, that is what we want to get, okay? So, I will come back when we are ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so it's several days after the clips you just saw. Of course, while I was letting that fire sit overnight, it rained. The forecast didn't call for rain, but it rained anyway, which washed all the potassium carbonate out of that ash, so I had to start again. I made a much bigger fire this time. Most of it consisted of dead wood that I harvested out of the woods here, right at, on the back side of the yard. That's someone else's property, so I can't go more than like a couple of feet into there, but there's so much dead wood back there. I was able to have a bonfire going for a few hours. The next morning I came out, and even though the ash was still hot, I used a shovel and I scooped it up and put it in a container like this. I damped it down with a little bit of water just to cool it down, not too much, because then separating all the stuff out becomes an incredibly massive pain in the ass. And just left it until I could get to it. So this afternoon, what I've done is I've taken this little mesh strainer and I scooped out the raw ash and just sat here and just like this until I was able to separate out all of the fine particulates, and that's what we have there. What's left over, you can see here, it's just bits of unburnt wood, little bits, chunks of clay, because this is the South and red clay is like underneath all the topsoil here. There's also small stones, debris like that. Now, you could try to filter this out, but it would make filtering it an absolute fucking nightmare. I recommend going with something like this. I still count this as a primitive prep. I mean, we're not, we're using hand tools and common, simple devices. None of this is strictly necessary. All you need is a container of some kind, and you could do what we're about to do with this, because there's still chunks of unburnt wood that made it into there. We are going to add water to this, and we're going to stir it up real good. And a lot of the unburnt wood, of course, is going to float. So we can just scoop that shit off the surface. That's very easy. It's the other stuff that's going to be a pain in the ass. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a natural filter using cleavers, gallium aperine. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Aperine? I don't know. It's that plant. You see it on the screen. We have some back here that's... I love this little plant. Don't ask me why. It's just a cool little plant. It's one of the first plants that you see in the spring. When that shit starts to come out of the ground, you know spring is here. Also, the stems stick to each other like Velcro because they're covered with little tiny hooks. And that makes it great for creating all natural makeshift filters. Obviously, the fine particles are not going to be filtered out. We wouldn't even really want them to be because, I mean, that would just clog up the filter and make it it would be days of trying to filter that shit or changing it constantly. We just want to filter out the bigger stuff, pebbles, chunks of wood that don't flow, any kind of debris like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit and we're going to let everything settle out by gravity. In my experience, it's best not to leave it flat like this because as soon as you tip it to pour any of the water out, it's going to shift at the bottom and it's going to stir up a fuck ton of sediment. In my experience, once you've mixed this with water and thoroughly mixed it up, which of course dissolves and extracts all the potassium carbonate, set it at an angle like this where it's sitting on a corner. That way all of the solid material is already down here, and when you go to pour it, you're going to disturb it a lot less. That will just make your lives a lot easier if you do that. And just use some stones or bricks or whatever, just prop it up on its corner there as best you can. Obviously don't let it spill. So I am going to go extract this shit with some water here, and then we are going to take a look at it and we are going to filter it. Okay, so this has been soaking for a while. I've been stirring it with this spade, trying to keep the sediment at the bottom mixed up as much as possible. When this stuff settles, it's like wet cement. You can see all of our basically carbon chunks floating on the surface there. So we're just going to scoop that shit off of there. That was a good bit of it. Just gonna get rid of that. This will be stuff we won't have to filter off. Make our lives a little bit easier. Make sure the dogs don't eat that shit. It would probably be very alkaline. I can't imagine it would taste very good. Okay. Of course, we're only going to be able to get so much here, but that's okay. All right. Fuck it. Now, here is the cleavers. Now, this little plant, you can see what I was talking about. Once it's in a bunch, it tends to stay in a bunch because the stems, and you can feel it when you touch these things, are kind of sticky. They do adhere to each other very well. You can see where these guys are already starting to put out seed pods. They don't last very long. You could use really, any plant to do this. It's just that historically, from what I've read, cleavers was used to make like crude filters for milk way back in the old days. I'm not sure why. You'd think if there were chunks if you're in your milk. Maybe it's like cheese or something. Because if they're like, filtering chunky milk to drink it, that's really gross. This was also used to make bed straw. It was used as bed straw. Again, because it tends to clump together in fluffy little mats. So, yes, people would actually sleep on this stuff. Kind of neat, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this. Whoops. We're going to kick the tripod. We're going to take some of this, just going to create a big mat of it, and put it in this funnel right here. Maybe not quite that thick, because that's just seems like that's not going to hold a lot of solids before it starts to overflow. Okay, press that down in there. All right, how's that for primitive, right? Okay, so you can see we've got a nice thick mat of this shit. And now for the actual filtering. I should point out there is one other trick I have used to filter this stuff that I haven't mentioned. And it's kind of a bitch all on its own, but it will filter out everything, even the smallest particle. And that is to take a flower pot. You can fill it up with regular old potting soil. It helps if it's really old and it's like, you know, been sitting out in the weather for years so that most of the shit has already been washed out of it. And then just set it up somewhere where it can easily drain out the bottom, and then just pour clean water through it until what's coming out the bottom of the flower pot after passing through all the soil is crystal clear. Then filter your ashy cement water through that, and it will remove every, you know, every particle of this stuff, no matter how small it is. Of course, there's a good chance that you may dissolve other stuff into it from the soil because, again, this is a solution of potassium carbonate, so it should have a reasonably high pH. So yeah, it might extract other stuff out with it. However, you know, if you want to go about it that way, it is an option. It does work. So anyway, here we go with filtering this shit. Okay, I hope this gives you guys a good view. Also have a laugh trying to watch a cripple lift a bucket of water. It is pretty amusing. I laugh. All right. And as promised, it will separate out the larger particles and apparently even the floaty surface scum. And what we're getting in here is water that is full of finer sediment. So again, this is not going to clear everything out of it. It's just clearing out the larger particles, which is going to make this easier to deal with. Oh, wow. Damn. I might be doing a little bit better than I thought it would. Maybe it's one of those deals where the more you hear, the better it gets. After all, it's not exactly barium sulfate sized particles. Whoa! Okay, well, so we'll have to do it more than once. Big deal. Probably have to do that anyway. Since the first time we did it, larger particles would have got through. I'm really surprised that it catches as much as it does. Huh. Yeah, I haven't actually tried this with the cleavers before. God damn. Shit. Okay. People in the old days were not exactly dumb, apparently. I knew that. But people do like to forget it today, don't they? Huh. I'll be damned. Okay, I've just got to see. What are we achieving here? Get a little bit of this here. Holy butt fucking shit. Okay, wait. I gotta get you guys so you can see this shit. Look at this shit. We did that with a wad of plants, man. Hell yes. Damn. That's pretty fucking cool. Well, I'm going to try refiltering this, and I'm going to do the whole process here. Obviously, it'd be way too long to film the whole thing, so I will just come back when I'm done, and you guys can see what I'm able to achieve with this. This is really neat. I did not think it was going to work that well. Okay, everybody, so here is our solution. And as you can see, it is essentially clear at this point. Those black streaks, those are stains on the bottom. It isn't 100% free of particulates, but that's okay, because we're going to have to filter it again later anyway, after we evaporate it down some more. You can also see that it has a distinctly brown color. I hope that's showing up. That's normal. It does that every time I've done this before. After filtering it through the cleavers, I then filtered it through an old rag a couple of times, and that removed most of the stuff. But we'll just have to do a better filtration again later on in order to remove those few particulates, or we'll just let it sediment out by gravity. What I've got to evaporate this down, since we're trying to do this in a primitive and least costly manner possible, is we're going to use plain old-fashioned fire. I've got a great big pot here that we are going to use to do this in, and as for the fire, we've got that going on over here in the usual place where I have fire related to the lab. You can see I've been testing it out here, getting water to boil. It was pretty easy. It was all just a matter of figuring out how to arrange the wood in there so it would get plenty of oxygen and actually burn well. So anyway, the next step is just to pour that shit into the pot, put the pot on here, and let that fucker boil. So I will come back when there's something to report. Okay, everybody, so after redesigning the fireplace a little bit to kind of open it up so it could get a little bit better airflow, I've begun to evaporate down the wood ash extract. I just went and got a $10 stainless steel pot at the dollar store. Yeah, I mean, if this isn't primitive synthesis, man, I don't know what is. However, firewood is free. There's plenty of dead wood back in the woods, man. I don't even have to go very far back in there, just a few feet, and there's a ton of it. So, you know, hey, why spend money on electricity when you can do it the inexpensive way, the all-natural way, the holy shit, it's blowing smoke in my face and getting really hot way? Okay, so all we've got to do now is let our extract boil down until it begins to crystallize. I don't know what it would be, how successful it would be to try to calcine it in the bottom of that pot. We would have to calcine it if we wanted it to actually come out to be somewhat pure, because as you can see, the liquid itself is kind of brown, and I think that's just because there's organics in it. You could heat it up to about like 1,000 C in a furnace or something, and that would definitely burn it all off, and you'll end up with a nice white crystalline product that's almost all potassium carbonate. I don't know. So long as we can produce crude potash, I mean, that'll be a step in the right direction, and I'll be fairly happy with that. So, just gonna let this fucker boil, and I will come back when there's something to show you guys. Okay, everybody, so it's a few hours later, and all of the water has evaporated. We have a crust of crude potash on the bottom that is heavily contaminated with organic material. So what I did was I just took the pot off and just set it directly onto the bed of coals here. Maybe zooming out might help a little bit. You can see it a little better there. There is an extremely thick bed of very hot coals. That's a few inches thick. I'm just going to let this thing sit on it, and over the course of time, it will burn off the organics as it is already doing, and will give us a product that is a bit more like that, more of a white color. I'm just going to let this sit here and cook. I didn't think it would calcine quite this good just all on its own, but then it didn't occur to me until just now just to set it on the bed of coals once it was done boiling away. I wouldn't do that beforehand because, of course, it'll be hard to keep it stable on there. So, anyway, once this is done calcining, I will redissolve it in water, re-evaporate it down, and that should give us our potash. So, this is very nearly done. I will come back when all of that has been dealt with and we're ready to wrap this up. Very cool. Okay, people, this is it. This is our crystallized potash. If it seems like that's not very much, there's a good reason for it. Right as I was evaporating this down, I managed to spill it, so most of it ended up here because of course, but whatever, we had enough of it to keep going, and so go with it I did. You can see it's nice. It's a very light brown. It's actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. After it had kind of calcined there over the fire, I was able to get it, when it's calcining, originally it will start out as looking almost completely black, no matter how much you cook the shit out of it, like unless you were to put it in a furnace or an oven or something. If you keep adding water to it and letting it evaporate away, it will change from black to a gray looking stuff. I then extracted that with water, filtered it through a cotton plug, and then evaporated this down. It got very thick towards the end, and it started to bubble kind of vigorously, and that's actually what knocked it over, made a huge fucking mess. I'm so glad I was able to at least recover this much of it, so I've got something to show you guys. That was days of work, man. There was no way I wasn't going with it. When I tested the solution right before evaporating it down, it had a pH between 10 and 12, which is exactly what I would expect from potassium carbonate. This stuff is hygroscopic. This is the second take of me filming this, and it's already starting to look a little damp. So yeah, this is it, man. We have made it's decent potash. To get it any better than that, we'd have to bake it in an oven in order to burn off the remaining organics. But I mean, for the crude stuff, this is pretty damn good. And could be used, I mean, you couldn't do any preps or write any papers with it, but if you needed alkali for any other reason, I don't know. If civilization collapses, at least now you have a way to make soap, so you don't have to be some dirty motherfucker. That's pretty cool, right? We've made potassium carbonate using nothing more than plants, fire, wood, a few, easy to acquire implements, and that's about it. So, yeah. If you guys liked that video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, well, you make shit from nature, Mr. Badass. Subscribe, comment, share the video, donate a few bucks if you enjoyed this, and until the next one, you guys, I will see you later. That turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It'd be better if I hadn't fucking knocked it over.